Aristotle, and the enigma of the eel. For countless thousands of years, people have tried to understand the eel and failed. Aristotle studied it carefully, but to no avail. Sigmund Freud spent part of his youth trying to solve the problem of eel, and many great names in the history of the natural sciences set out in search of answers without success. Lonely, living in the dark and on the shore, the eel seems to be hiding from us. So today, if you choose to follow me, you will learn a completely and utterly bizarre story. In the northwest of the Atlantic Ocean, in an area called the Sargasso Sea, there is a sea within an ocean, a water within a water, different from the waters of the Atlantic. Here there are other conditions and other kinds of creatures instead of clear borders. The Sargasso Sea is defined by four major ocean currents in the west: the Gulf Current in the north, the North Atlantic Current in the east, the Canary Current, and in the south, the North Equatorial Current. Held in place by the four water currents of the Sargasso Sea is a calm area with the waters covered by endless fields of sticky brown algae called sargasso, hence the sea's name. The masses of algae that stretch for miles along the water cover the surface, providing food and shelter for the multitude of small creatures: invertebrates, fish and jellyfish, turtles, shrimps and crabs. Below, in the depths, other plant species grow. Life thrives in the dark like a night forest. Columbus was stuck here for a few weeks, advancing with great difficulty through the waters covered with algae. Also here, thousands of kilometers away from us, the European anguilla eel is born. Here they come in the spring to the dark depths and lay their eggs. It seems that the Sargasso Sea is the only place in the world where they can breed. Little creatures with undeveloped eyes slowly appear from the darkness. In the first stage of life, the stilts are in the form of larvae called leptocephalus. The larvae are only a few millimeters long and resemble willow leaves in body. As a child, the European larvae swims relaxed through the calm waters near Cuba. Then begins its incredible journey. With life in the body and ambition in the soul, the little larvae take the ocean path and let it be carried by the current of the Gulf, a path of thousands of km, until they reach the coasts of Europe. The journey can last up to 3 years, while the larvae develop slowly, inflated like a balloon. Once they arrive in Europe, they go through their first metamorphosis, becoming 5-7 centimeters glass eels, almost completely transparent, crawling and defenseless creatures. In the country of the Basques, glass eels are caught and eaten, being considered a delicacy. Once in Europe, the eel takes the river path, going in the opposite direction of the water flow and heading towards the spring. Surprisingly, the eel adapts almost immediately to the existence in fresh water. Here, too, it undergoes another transformation, becoming yellow. His body twists and becomes muscular, has small and dark eyes. The jaw is wide and strong. The skin is pigmented and acquires shades of brown, yellow, and gray. From the flailing and fragile creature, the print transforms into something much stronger and more powerful. With the new body, the eel continues its journey, doing quite well in small water and deep water, facing strong currents and deftly passing through murky water. It lives in cold water but easily adapts to the conditions in the warm water, and that's not even the most amazing eel ability. If necessary, the yellow eel can pass through swamps and ditches. The creature does not let the circumstances stand in its way, and when it has no aquatic possibility to turn to, it can take the dry path, winding through wet bushes and grass with twitches that last for hours just to reach other waters. Thus, the eel is a fish that can pass the fish condition. Maybe he's not even aware that he's a fish. Until now, the eel that was born somewhere near Cuba has crossed the ocean, climbed the river, passed through the swamps, came out on land, transformed its body 3 times, and finally, through who knows what mysterious process, he found a home. It is not an enviable home. In fact, the eel adapts easily and can be found in the alibi of lakes or muddy streams. It prefers stones where it can hide and with enough food to develop. After thousands of km of road, the eel settles down at his home and lives his life in an area of several hundred meters. Here he lingers year after year attached to the place. Eels were captured by researchers tagged with radio transmitters and released. They find their way home even though they have traveled many kilometers. No one understood how they managed to do this, and as you can see, no one understood much of the life of eels in general. In his little house, the eel lives as a monk, staying alone in the mud, or less often coiled together with other eels. At night, it goes in search of food. It eats any worms, larvae, crayfish, insects. Sometimes, if necessary, it also eats mice and baby birds. Most of its long life, the European eel is yellowish-brown in shape and lives alone near the home. 2,400 years ago, Aristotle sat and looked with intent and interest at a print. He knew nothing. He didn't know how it multiplied. He didn't know where it came from. He didn't even know if it was a fish. Obviously, he had no chance of finding out where he was born, since no Europeans had been there, and the equipment needed to study print was effectively thousands of years away from his lifetime. From the little that he could find out, Aristotle drew the following conclusions. First of all, he believed that unlike all other fish, the eel do not breed. He believed that it was a sexless fish, neither male nor female. His theory is interesting, but it has a problem. If it doesn't breed, how does the eel reproduce? The idea that explains the appearance of the eels came after studying during the drought a small pond. After the water disappears and the mud dries up, says Aristotle, all that remains in the place of the pond is a solid bottom where nothing can live. However, at first sight, something incredible happens. The pond becomes populated with eels. The only explanation that Aristotle was able to give is that they are born from rainwater. In the conditions of 2,400 years ago, we are looking at a fish that appears out of nowhere. Aristotle's conclusions at that time seemed more plausible than that he is imprisoned on the other side of the planet, goes up the river. His organs grow later. If you said something like that, everyone would have looked at you like crazy. He thought that eels ate grass like sheep, and that they could feed on mud if needed. He knew they could survive on dry land, but he assumed they lived longer if the wind blew from the north. Of all the assumptions based on observations, one is the most important, because it is an idea that will affect the West in the same way. It's about the idea that they just appear. The first developmental stage of eel, concluded Aristotle, is actually a small worm-like creature, a kind of earthworm that is conceived spontaneously and without the involvement of any other living being. He didn't know how it appears, but he knew that it's there, so it appears. How? It simply appears. The fact that life can come out of nothing was strangely easy to accept at that time. Many believed Aristotle, others believed Pliny the Elder, who died during the eruption of the Vesuvius volcano. Pliny the Elder, alive at that time, believed that the eels multiplied by rubbing against the stones. The eel comes, sees a stone, rubs against it, and from its body come off particles that later become other larvae. It's interesting that Pliny believed that eels are born out of nothing. So did the Egyptians. Some said that they appeared when the sun's rays warmed the waters of the Nile. Others believed that the eels were born from the foam of the sea. Others said that they were born from the morning dew well warmed by the sun. The basis of this idea is the belief that death can be transformed into life. How could one find an explanation for the existence of this reasoning? Who would have thought that this fish has such an exotic life? And who would have thought that looking at what the eel does, we end up asking questions about the source of life? The search for organs of eel had already become a national obsession in Germany, and Freud was seriously considering dedicating his life to either natural science, biology, or physiology. Unexpectedly, in his youth, Freud wanted to study using concrete, tangible, and measurable data, and that is exactly what this young man of 19 years old did. Arrived in Trieste in the spring of 1876 armed with the ambition to find an answer to the enigma of the eel, and thus leave his mark on the history of science. Like any other 19-year-old, Freud had two preoccupations in life. eels, and women, of course referring to the women of the city in the letters. From that time Freud analyzed women with the same thoroughness with which he dissected eels. It is a shame not to make a small parenthesis and give some observations about women, according to Freud's writings. He said that the townspeople are tall, slender with long noses and black eyebrows. He said that there were women who left a model over their eyes as a kind of hook to hook your soul. Freud chose a laboratory in the immediate vicinity of the Adriatic. Every morning he looked for the fishermen in the harbor and inspected their catch, bought whole baskets of squid and brought them to him in the laboratory. Day after day he sat there dissecting eel after eel, examining under the microscope and taking notes. He set off convinced that he would succeed. After a few hundred eels analyzed, he became frustrated after a month of searching for organs. It is clear that all he does is torment eels in vain, so he gave up. Testicles of eels represented the first scientific task, and Freud did not live up to expectations and abandoned the work. We could say that the one who defined sex between people did it after giving up the search for sex between eels. But what he didn't note, of course, was that eels don't have visible sex organs until they need them. The metamorphoses they go through are not just superficial adaptations to the new living conditions. They are existential conditions. An eel becomes what it needs to become at the right time. Another 20 years pass, and another man succeeds in finding a male in Sicily after more than 2,000 years of debates of enlightened minds. People knew in great detail what the reproductive organ of eels looked like. They knew what it looks like, but they didn't know what it does with this organ and where. For that it took another researcher who searched for the mating place of the shrews for much longer than you can imagine. The one who discovered the eel's love nest, a Dane named Johann Schmidt, was a marine biologist. When he was small, his father left and never came back. His mother was left alone and moved with the children to Copenhagen. She was not rich and she had 3 children to feed because she had a file in Copenhagen at the Carlsberg brewery. The peak when Schmidt moved next to the brewery, the chemist Louis Pasteur was invited to present his views in front of the brewers. At that point, Carlsberg was already a business that wanted to gain world recognition. In addition to brewing, Carlsberg turned its attention to modern and advanced research, and this not only in terms of brewing and food preservation is a commercially calculated move. In time helped to develop from a small family brewery into one of the largest in the world. Unfortunately, after many searches, when Schmidt was faced with the mystery of the eels, he had to stop his search because of the war. While he was waiting for the end of the war, he continued to make other tables and studies related to eels. A year after the end of the war, he managed to find the place of birth by collecting thousands of tiny specimens of prints. This place turned out to be the Sargasso Sea, the place where we started. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to see more interesting videos.